Thanks so much. Very pleased to get a chance to kick off the first ever Data Field Day. Excited to see how this format goes. Pleased to have the group in the room here, and welcome to all of those of you watching live or after the fact. My name is Mike Olson. I am one of the founders of Cloudera. I serve today as the company's Chief Strategy Officer. From our founding about 7 years ago until just about 2 years ago, I was the company's CEO. Stepped into this role in order to be closer to product, closer to customers, and closer to our partner network. And that's worked out fabulously well. I get to spend my time doing stuff that I feel way more competent at. I'm an engineer by training. And in addition, I've shed all of the really cruddy work that I had to do on budgeting and finance and planning and the rest. So I highly recommend that transition to anyone contemplating it. We've got a pretty great format and content put together for you today. I'm going to take about 30 minutes up front. I want to orient the discussion, explain a little bit about who we are, what we think we're doing. I'll give you some background on the business, but not mostly that. I'm hoping that what we get is, in this initial part, some really good Q&A and interactivity. We'll have a chance to take you deeper into product and strategy, including demonstrating some of the capabilities that we've got later today. I'm a database guy. 25 years in the relational industry, building and selling relational database products. I worked for Informix after an acquisition. I was acquired into Oracle most recently, stayed there for 2 years. My entire career has been delivering enterprise-grade data management software to big companies. I left Oracle after their acquisition of my last company in 2008. Spent about 2 years there. At that time, I wanted to go do something different. I'd spent a quarter century, as I said, building and selling relational products. It was good, but it wasn't that interesting. We built really the same kind of products, progressively better, more stable, a little more scalable, more workloads. But the substrate, the stuff that I worked on, really hadn't changed significantly over the course of my career. Transactions and distributed transactions and so on, same problem. When I left Oracle in 2008, I decided not to be a database guy anymore. I was going to go do something new. I looked around the industry and came across the Hadoop technology. Now, I'd actually encountered it in 2000 to 2004. Google published its research papers on its source technology at that time. Very few of us in the industry took it seriously in those early years. Certainly I didn't. We were building high-end transaction processing systems. Google was doing something very different, and we didn't recognize it as important to our customers. 2008, out of Oracle, looking for the next thing to do, I had a chance to talk to Facebook, to Yahoo, to Google about how they were using this new technology. Way more data than was ever available to companies previously. Much more various data, lots of different formats, including formats you couldn't predict in advance. You get new stuff coming in you didn't know about. And subjected to analytics that had not previously been possible. Think just briefly about what Google was doing in 2000, 2002, 2004. Sucking the entire internet regularly, like a couple times a week, now continuously, but at the time it was episodic. And then build an index, right? If you had asked anybody in the industry, we'd have told you that was flat ridiculous. And just, you think about it, in order to suck up the whole web, you need a storage system as big as the whole web. And that's pretty audacious all by itself. And then, how do you bring enough CPUs to the party to build that index? Not just that problem, but Google wanted to observe user behavior and to improve their results. If I go to Google, I run a search, I get a list of results back, I click on number 3, I just told Google something really interesting about 1 and 2. So they wanted not just to index the web, but to observe user behavior. How were people querying? What were they doing with the results? And continually refine their results. They couldn't buy that software. Those of us in the database industry didn't make that product. It was obviously not possible to make that product. Google didn't know that, so they built it. They described what they did. By 2008, it was used everywhere in the consumer internet. Every single web property at scale was Hadooping their heads off. My co-founders and I, one each, by the way, from Yahoo, Facebook, Google, and Oracle. One of these things is not like the other. All four of us believed that traditional enterprises were going to have those problems. They were going to want to ingest way more data than ever before. They were going to want to analyze it in powerful new ways. It wasn't that Google was different, they were just in the future by a few years. And we saw an opportunity to bring that Google magic to traditional enterprises. So we saddled up and prepared to do just that. What Google invented in 2004, that range, what we see in the market, what we've helped deliver to the market today, very, very different. It used to be fairly constrained, batch mode, complex to use analytic processing. Increasingly over time, good SQL access, built-in search, streaming and real-time data delivery, security, governance, and so on. Those capabilities have entered the platform. We've driven them into our product. It's expanded the use cases. But fundamentally, companies, organizations are able now to suck in huge amounts of data from lots of different places, combine them in ways that were previously impossible. You don't have tables in your relational database and documents in your document store and struggle to integrate them. You're allowed to land them in one place, and you can build single analytic workloads that walk over them. I tell you this longest story because the moral is that data is happening in the world in a way today that it never was before. We've all heard of Internet of Things. We've all seen the explosion in data that mobile devices and web connectivity are driving. If we can capture and analyze that data, we can understand not just user behavior on the web, but systems, stock trading, power generation, energy exploration in ways that were previously impossible. We're going to change the planet because we're able to get and use data in ways that we couldn't before. And that was and is the vision that Cloudera is pursuing. Very excited about it. In 2008, when we began the business, we're the only guys in the room. Nobody else was thinking about Hadoop for enterprise use. The meme big data had not even happened yet. Those words weren't used in the industry. Fast forward 7 years, very different story. Lots of vendors in the space, lots of investment, lots of activity, lots of innovation. The stuff I complained about the relational industry, right, wasn't very interesting. Nothing dramatic happened during my 25 years. That's history. Big data and big data platforms are evolving at a furious clip. New ideas are turning into open source projects all over the place. It's a pretty exciting time to be in the database industry. We published at the beginning of this fiscal year, for the first time ever, a recap of our results from the previous fiscal year. So we've never done that before. You guys may have seen these numbers, but I just want to recap them because we're pretty excited about what they indicate for us and for the market at large. Our year-on-year growth, that is our fiscal 15, which is over now. We're in fiscal 16 at Cloudera right now. Fiscal 15, software revenues grew 100% from the prior year. And in a fast-growing market, that's what you'd expect, about doubling every single year. Our total revenues were in excess of $100 million. Now, I highlight this because in the history of the planet, one other company has broken that barrier. It was Red Hat in open source. We're the second open source company in the world to do that. We think we've got lots of runway in front of us, but it's great for us that we've been able to get to that scale. I think it creates a sustainability that's going to be very good for us, very good for our customers. We announced for the last fiscal year, 525 enterprise customers, about 250 added in the year, more than 800 employees, and more than 1,450 partners. Now those are the numbers at the close of last fiscal year. January 30th, 2015, those were all of our stats for the year that ended then. We've just closed another quarter. We haven't yet disclosed those results. What I can say is the market is growing very, very quickly. We see expanding opportunity. We're certainly pleased with the progress that we've made. One other important thing happened in the last fiscal year. We struck a strategic partnership with Intel Corporation. Intel, a big investor in technology and systems for the data center, saw the opportunity that big data represented to drive real expansion in the market for systems and hardware. right? If you're going to roll out great big multi-node Hadoop clusters, you're going to need lots of Intel silicon, lots of networking, lots of storage in order to do that. A big way for the dominant player in the hardware market to expand, not by stealing share from others, but by creating new opportunity, by expanding the total market. Intel has given us access to the chip roadmap. So we know today what will be rolling out in the silicon in the years to come. How will compute change? How will storage architectures evolve? What will networking on systems look like? What will the balance of sort of traditional RAM and SSD and so on be? As those changes happen, our computational and storage fabric needs to change. Hadoop needs to change. The advantage that we've got in the market right now is we can understand what those changes will be, work on that open source software in order to take advantage of the unique capabilities of the chip as it becomes available, of the systems as they become available, and deliver it to the market. We've already delivered great innovation into the open source ecosystem. Intel Silicon, for example, has arithmetic support on chip for AES-NI encryption. Make that go really, really quick. You can encrypt for 1% to 2% overhead data on the chip now because there's hardware accelerators. That makes it possible to secure big data, right? If you're paying a 30% tax to encrypt data, it's too expensive to encrypt anything. But at that cost, what the heck, man? Just encrypt absolutely everything. That's an example. You will see systems and data center design change as a result of the changes that are coming from Intel, and we're helping to drive that because of our relationship. They're part of the relationship. Intel took an 18% ownership stake in Cloudera, spent $740 million to do so. Just prior to that, we had run a funding round. We brought in money from some public market investors, and that's a pretty common thing to do ahead of an IPO, called a mezzanine round. So T. Rowe Price led a round that put $160 million into the company. Google came in, Michael Dell came in. We were very pleased with that. But January, February timeframe, we brought in $160 million. Just a few months later, for that strategic partnership with Intel, we brought in $740 million. That's $900 million capital raised in the first quarter of last year. That is an objectively insane number, right? This is a software company, right? We don't need to build jet engines, right? So what are we doing with that? Well, look, I mean, we've got a serious cash pile. We can invest and acquire as we see necessary. Mostly what it's done is given us the latitude to operate according to strategic imperative, not to be driven by our funding requirements. We can reach out and acquire companies, whether they're accretive or not. And we made some great acquisitions in the last year. I expect we're going to continue to do that.
Cheeky question.
Lots of companies, go ahead.
Cheeky question on that. How are you going to pay it back?
Oh, they bought equity, right? They're investors in Cloudera,
Yep.
right? So over time, we'll continue to grow. We expect one day to IPO. Everybody's stock, mine and Intel's and all of our VCs and all of our employees, will be saleable on the public market. So it's not a borrow. It is as if we had raised money from any other investor. In fact, they are our single largest strategic investor.
Okay.
So we've got plenty of cash that we can use for whatever we need to use it for. The main effect has been to take pressure off of us for an IPO. There's a lot of good reasons to have an IPO, right? But there are drawbacks as well. In the scrutiny of the public markets, it's more difficult to make non-accretive acquisitions and long-term investments because you got to keep Wall Street happy on a quarterly basis. Well, look, we want to keep Wall Street happy, but we can choose when we go do that. We don't have the financing pressure that we would otherwise have. Now, we've always said, still true, we are building a long-term, independent, standalone business. That's been our conviction as founders from the beginning. It remains the conviction of the founders and of the management team. We absolutely want to do it. We don't have a timeline for IPO, but my expectation is we will one day have an initial public offering. I believe we've got the scale now to be an independent player for the long term. I want to talk just a little bit about what's happening in the market around us right now. It's very important to sort of view the success that we're having in that context. When we started out, nobody knew what Hadoop was. I mean, if I came to you in 2009 and talked Pig and Scoop and Flume, and you would have had no clue, right? We had to, in the early years, be super evangelical. We had to really do a technology education project in order to win early customers. Over time, the market's gotten familiar with the concept of big data. Everybody's heard of Hadoop. Even people who don't know what it is think they probably need some of it. We've been able to up-level our message a bit. We don't have to convince people that data can make a difference to their businesses. We don't have to demonstrate over and over again that we've got a platform that you can deploy, operate, run at scale, and so on. It's important that you be able to do that. But nobody buys a database because it's easy to manage, right? I mean, think about Oracle, IBM, Microsoft. People buy applications. People have important business or mission or operational problems to solve. And so they go buy the software that allows an ordinary human being who may not be a Java programmer at all to do that job. That requires applications, tools, systems integrators, basically a stack of value on top of the database. So when someone comes to us looking for software that will allow them to engage even better with their retail customers, software that will allow a bank even more accurately to understand the risk in its equity portfolios, we can offer that with our partners. Those solutions now exist. When they sell, they drag our platform into deployment. And this is exactly what I saw unfold in the relational database market from the time I began working there in the middle 1980s. That dynamic is very much alive in this ecosystem today. So we're seeing more, better applications and tools emerge to solve real business problems on top of this new platform that's different in kind from what came before. All the stuff that we're used to, all of the BI and reporting and sort of data exploration tools that users know how to work with, hey, they run on this thing too. Right? We support interactive SQL, that's all fine. So you can take your existing skills, bring them to the party, but you can also buy and use really powerful new apps that know there are 1,000 servers underneath the covers that know how to do machine learning. You can never do that before. You can do it now. And you can do it in that same infrastructure, your existing skills plus these new capabilities. If you're going to roll out a big data platform, you put a lot of data in one place, you're going to bring all of these new analytic and processing frameworks, you've got a number of issues. You need to know that you can deploy and operate the thing, right? It's not like you go buy a computer to do this. You buy 10, 100, 1,000 machines. Standing it up, running it, operating it, setting and hitting your service level agreements with that stuff is tricky. We've delivered the industry's very best management framework to do that. So you can, in the IT center now, deploy and operate this thing at reasonable cost. An ordinary skill set, someone who knows how to be an Oracle DBA can learn how to be a Cloudera DBA, right? That's been an important step forward. But as I said before, ease of operation is not enough. All your data's in one place. Think about what that means. Most banks, most hospitals, even most retailers that we deal with, take security very, very seriously. The consumer internet, where this stuff was invented, not so much, right? You break into a Yahoo cluster, steal a news story, who cares, right? Break into a bank's big data platform, steal some transaction data, that's a big issue. We deliver the industry's only secure, compliant data store. We've been through PCI DSS certification with some of our financial services clients. That's now a service you can buy if you're in the market for it. So you're allowed by regulatory fiat to put sensitive personal information, transactions, medical info, and more into this platform. We can tell you who touched it, what did they do with it, and when. So if a regulator or a law enforcement official shows up demanding that data, you're able to deliver it. You put a lot of data in one place, you transform it, it sits there for a while, you kind of forget where it came from, right? You'd like to be able to pick up any artifact in the system and describe what happened to it, where did it come from, who touched it, what did they do with it. Can I trace the history of a particular data object back? Turns out, yeah, we're able to do that. So operations is important, but also security, compliance, data governance. And once again, not a fair fight. We've been in the market longer than others, and we've been working with large enterprise clients on secure problems in financial services and in healthcare and more for longer than anybody else. But we bring all that to market. The last development I want to talk to you guys about, relatively recent, but pretty dramatic. In the beginning, Google built a system that ran in Google data centers. And the architecture that they published, very much behind the firewall on premises, right? And in the early years of Hadoop, we rolled out our product. You went and you bought some servers from HP, Dell, IBM, who you liked. You put them in your own data center and you deployed our software on them. Over time, more and more of our customers are beginning to look at private cloud infrastructure. So I want elasticity in my own data center. We've had to embrace that. We do. OpenStack, VMware, great solutions. More significantly, though, there had been relatively little large enterprise adoption of public cloud for production workloads in the first few years of our business. That's changing. We're now seeing meaningful workloads roll out on Microsoft Azure, on Amazon Web Services. We're beginning to see customers deploy real hybrid cloud deployments. When we started, I thought what would happen would be that in your data center, you'd build your big data platform, and you would chew on your data all year long. And then Christmas would happen, and you would have your Christmas spike in usage, and you would just burst to the cloud. Well, it turns out that was a stupid thing to believe. You'd have to move the data out, and that's time consuming, and how do your systems know where the stuff is? In fact, here's what's happened. There is data that is born in the data center. Think of your customer master record, think of your sales transactions. That stuff has been coming home forever and ever, amen, and it'll continue to do that. And that's a natural place to stand up the big data infrastructure that operates on it. But you know, there's a lot of data that's born in the cloud. Think of, for example, these IoT workloads, sensor data streaming in from smart buildings or the smart grid. Think about another example is to think about workloads where an entity is aggregating data. So one of our customers, FINRA, the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, gets from all the banks that operate in the US every single day all of their transactions, every transaction that their traders made. 30 billion market events per day. They don't need to put that in their own data center. They need to put that in a platform where they can analyze it at scale. They've stood up Cloudera on Amazon Web Services. They use that platform to build networks of relationships among traders at different banks looking for patterns of collusion. Who may be gaming the market? Who may be participating in money laundering or fraud or other activities? Every bank is able only to see its own transactions. FINRA gets to see them all, and they're able to roll that out very elastically, very flexibly on Amazon Web Services and provide better safety in the market as a result. Complex analytics as you're building this graph and you're traversing it in real time. The moral of that story is that data will live where it's born. Some data is born in the data center and it's going to live in the data center. Some data is born in the cloud and it's going to live in the cloud. Our hybrid cloud deployments we see these days follow that pattern precisely. Important to allow people to stand that stuff up wherever they want to, but the flexibility is critical. They've got to be able to deploy and operate these systems, and they want to do it in exactly the same way, regardless of where the data lives. Any questions on anything I've said here? I think I've totally snowed you guys. I didn't get interrupted but one time.
Open source as a business model. Non-open source people like to very publicly wring their hands and tut-tut about how hard your business model is.
I'm an old guy. My very first open source software development was on Berkeley Unix in 1980, yes. I was one of the authors of the Postgres database in the late 80s, early 90s at Berkeley. I have code running in Berkeley DB, which is why Oracle acquired Sleepycat back in the day. I haven't actually contributed any code to the Hadoop ecosystem, but what I have done is been in, if you count Cloudera, 3 or 4 different open source companies over time. And I've tried various ways to monetize. I'll say, first of all, I think the question's ill-formed. Open source is a distribution model, a licensing model, and a development model, but it's not a business model. Open source is an attribute, is a strategy for product, right? The question is, how do you monetize your product? Our conviction at Cloudera is that you can't build long-term, sustainable, pure open source businesses. And I make that claim consciously. I ran a company that we had to sell to Oracle because we kind of capped out on revenues. The difficulty is that when anybody on the planet can pick up the exact bits that you ship, when most of the planet is at least as smart as you are, it's difficult to maintain differentiation that allows you to maintain a price that allows you to invest in the platform. So what happens with pure play open source companies? They get to 20 to 50 million bucks in revenue, and they get acquired. They get acquired by companies that have other revenue streams. So think about Oracle buying MySQL, even Sun buying MySQL. They've got lots of ways to make money at good margins that they can then use to fund investment in the open source artifact, right? But in a market that matures, pure play open source bits get pushed to zero. We believe deeply in the open source platform. Nobody writes and gives away more software than Cloudera does. We develop projects that are now standard across all of the other distributions. We're a huge beneficiary of the activity of the open source ecosystem. If it's about storage, processing, analytics, it is open source from Cloudera.
So the challenge there then is, clearly there's a model where an open source project grows and is acquired by a bigger company with other services.
Right.
You're trying to grow the other services within the open source model, and the question is going to be whether that will work for the long term. And it might.
What we've done is created differentiated IP. We've got stuff that's not open source, that's uniquely ours. Our competitors will tell you that I'm a nefarious guy that's trying to lock our customers in because of my evil designs on their wallets.
They have, yeah.
I suspect so. I've heard rumors. Look, what I'm trying to do is lock IBM out, right? I don't want every single erg of engineering development that we do here to go to a very deep-pocketed competitor who's got lots of other sources of revenue. They're a good company, they're doing lots of great analytics, God bless them, they're in the ecosystem, but there must be something that we have that they can't pick up and give away for free in order to damage us. We will always have proprietary IP at Cloudera. The mix of what we've got over time may well change, right? We may decide that some stuff that was previously differentiating no longer is, right? But there will always be differentiated IP from Cloudera. You'll get a chance later today to see a demo by Anupam Singh, CEO of the company we acquired just a little while ago called Explain.io. Super, super cool analytics over query workloads that help users understand better how they should analyze their data going forward. Nobody else got that, right? We'll build and keep, this is Anupam now, we'll build and keep that sort of differentiation in our platform because it is how we maintain the margins that allow us to fund the huge development we're pouring into the open source bits that everybody can use. Make sense?
Yeah.
Convinced?
Actually, I want to thank you for being very honest about open source where it stands in terms of development and monetizing, your IP. Most people just gloss over it as if we're living in a communistic society where, the greater good is what brings it in. I'm totally against that. That's not something I believe in. But it's good to see somebody who says, this is what open source brings to the table. This is what we're doing, and this is where we're getting the money from, without being ambivalent about.
I appreciate the kind words. And let me say, I've been in open source for a long time. And as a developer, man, I'm a believer. It's a fantastic thing to do, right? But there are people who are religious or political fanatics about open source. I'm pretty pragmatic. It is a huge unfair advantage to Cloudera that I don't have to put a salesperson on site to get my code into somebody's organization, right? Download it, try it out, absolutely no risk. Those open source bits are super consumable. Open source software moves faster than proprietary software. There's no way Hadoop would have succeeded as a single vendor proprietary project. I mean, for one thing, who could afford to hire the thousands of smart people around the world working on this thing, right? We get the benefit of hiring geniuses no matter where they are. They can just show up and work on the project. No single company can outcompete the combined intellect of planet Earth. And we get that benefit in our development. All we got to do is figure out a way, nevertheless, to have a sustainable, growing revenue stream that's defensible against our competition. And I think we've hit a balance there that's working pretty well. You heard the numbers? Look, we got a lot of growing left to do, but we've set some pretty respectable benchmarks.